Hi there, and welcome back to the garden. I'm Eleanor. Before we begin, I want to hear a confession from you down in the comments. Have you ever brought home a plant on pure impulse, absolutely certain you'd love it, only to watch it struggle and die within a few weeks? Be honest, tell me what happened. I promise you, every single gardener watching this, myself very much included, has a story just like that. Here's something I've come to believe deeply after many years of both buying plants and, yes, killing my fair share of them. Most plant failures don't actually start in the garden. They start at the nursery, in the 10 minutes it takes to choose what goes in your cart. A plant that's wrong for your conditions or already stressed before you even bring it home is fighting an uphill battle from day one. No amount of good gardening afterward can fully make up for a poor choice at the checkout. The wonderful news is that avoiding these mistakes takes no special skill at all, just a little bit of knowledge about what to actually look for, and a few habits that take literally seconds to practice each time you shop. So today I'm sharing 10 common mistakes gardeners make when buying plants, and exactly how to avoid each one, so that every single plant you bring home has the very best possible chance of thriving. And do stay to the very end, because our last mistake is one that even experienced gardeners fall into, myself included, more often than we'd like to admit. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and if you love an easy, thriving, beautiful garden, tap that subscribe button. It truly helps this little channel grow. All right, let's shop smarter. Let's start with the single most common mistake I see, and it's also the easiest one to fix: not actually reading the plant tag before buying. That little tag tucked into the pot is genuinely a treasure trove of information. Mature size, sun requirements, water needs, hardiness zone, bloom time, and often specific care tips, all condensed into a few square inches. And yet, in the excitement of a beautiful nursery full of blooming plants, it's remarkably easy to grab something purely because it's pretty and toss it in the cart without ever flipping that tag over. This is exactly how so many of the problems we've discussed in earlier videos begin. An overgrown shrub swallowing a window, a sunlover planted in deep shade, a plant that outgrows its spot within 2 years. Here's the thing, the tag isn't a suggestion, it's genuinely the plant telling you what it needs to thrive. Ignoring it means you're essentially guessing, and guessing is exactly how good money gets spent on plants that struggle or die. My habit, and I'd encourage you to make it yours. Before a plant goes in your cart, take 15 seconds and actually read the whole tag, not just glance at the picture. Check the mature size against the space you have in mind, check the sun requirements against that actual spot, and check the water needs against how attentive you realistically are. My tip: if a nursery plant doesn't have a tag or the tag has fallen off, don't guess. Ask a staff member for the specific variety name and look it up on your phone before buying, right there in the aisle. It takes a minute and can save you years of frustration. Read the tag, save yourself the guesswork. It's the single easiest habit to build. Now let's talk about a mistake that's easy to forget you're even making, with number 2. Number 2 is a mistake that often happens without the gardener even realizing it: ignoring your hardiness zone. Your hardiness zone tells you the coldest winter temperatures your area typically experiences, and it's genuinely one of the most important pieces of information for choosing plants that will actually survive from one year to the next. Here's where this trips people up. Many big box stores and nurseries stock a wide range of plants, including some that simply aren't reliably hardy in your particular region. A gorgeous perennial that returns faithfully every year in a warmer zone might be a one-season annual, doomed to die over winter in a colder one. The plant looks just as beautiful sitting on the shelf either way, so there's no visual clue that it's wrong for your climate. If you don't already know your specific hardiness zone, it takes about 30 seconds to look up online using your zip code, and it's genuinely worth doing once and remembering, since it applies to nearly every perennial, shrub, and tree purchase you'll ever make. My habit: before buying any perennial, shrub, or tree meant to come back year after year, check the tag's listed hardiness zone range against your own zone. If your zone falls outside that range, either skip it or go in with clear eyes that you're buying it as a temporary one-season plant. My tip: when in doubt, or if a tag lists a zone right at the edge of your own, ask a staff member. Most independent nurseries stock plants suited to the local climate, and their staff usually know exactly which borderline plants tend to struggle in your specific area. Know your zone. Check every tag against it. It's a 30-second habit that saves entire plantings. Now let's talk about a mistake related to light with number 3. Number 3 is one we've touched on before in other videos, but it's worth dedicated attention right at the point of purchase: not checking a plant's actual sun and shade requirements before you buy. This mistake usually happens because gardeners fall in love with a plant at the nursery first and only think about where it might go afterward, rather than starting with the specific spot in mind and shopping for a plant that genuinely suits it. A sun-loving plant tucked into a shady spot will grow leggy, weak, and bloom poorly, stretching desperately toward what little light it can find. A shade lover baking in harsh afternoon sun will scorch and struggle. Neither ever reaches its full potential, no matter how well you otherwise care for it. Here's the fix, and it really is this simple. Before you even head to the nursery, take a few minutes to genuinely observe the spot you're shopping for. Does it get full sun most of the day, a few hours of morning sun, dappled light under a tree, or fairly deep shade? Bring that honest assessment with you and let it guide your choices, rather than working backward from a plant you already love. My tip: if you're not entirely sure how much sun a spot gets, spend one day actually checking on it every couple of hours and jotting down whether it's in sun or shade at each check. That simple, low-tech exercise gives you a far more accurate picture than guessing from memory, and it takes the guesswork entirely out of your next nursery trip. Know your light before you shop, not after. It's the difference between a plant that thrives and one that merely survives. Now let's talk about a mistake hiding right inside the pot with number 4. Number 4 is a mistake most gardeners never even think to check for because it's hidden entirely inside the pot: buying a rootbound plant without inspecting the root ball. Here's what happens. A plant sits in its nursery pot for too long, and its roots, with nowhere left to grow, begin circling tightly around the inside of the container, forming a dense, tangled mass. A plant in this state is genuinely stressed before you've even brought it home, and if you plant it straight into the ground without addressing those circling roots, they'll often continue growing in that same tight circular pattern rather than spreading outward into the surrounding soil, sometimes even strangling the plant's own stem or trunk over time as it matures. The good news is that checking for this takes only a few seconds, and it's a completely normal, expected thing to do at a nursery. No one will think twice about it. My habit: before buying, gently slide the plant partway out of its pot, or peek underneath if roots are visible through the drainage holes. You're looking for healthy white or tan roots with some visible soil between them, not a solid, dense wall of tightly circling roots with barely any soil in sight. My tip: if you do end up with a root-bound plant, either because it was the only option available or you didn't catch it in time, don't panic. Before planting, use your fingers or a clean knife to gently loosen and tease apart those circling roots, encouraging them to grow outward into the new soil, rather than continuing their tight circular pattern. A quick peek at the roots can save a plant's entire future. Don't skip this step. Now let's talk about a very natural but costly instinct with number 5. Number 5 is a wonderfully understandable, deeply human mistake, and I've made it myself more times than I'd like to admit: buying based purely on what happens to be in bloom the day you visit. It makes complete sense. Walking into a nursery and seeing a gorgeous display of whatever's flowering that particular week is genuinely irresistible. But here's the trap: if you only ever buy what's blooming in the moment, your garden ends up with a lopsided collection of plants that all flower at the same time, followed by long, quiet stretches with nothing happening at all. Remember our video on plants that bloom all summer and our fall blooming favorites. A truly beautiful garden is planned across the whole calendar, not assembled one flowering impulse buy at a time. The fix here isn't to never buy something in bloom, it's to shop with intention across the seasons, actively seeking out plants for the gaps in your garden's calendar, rather than only ever responding to whatever's flowering today. My habit: before heading to the nursery, glance at your existing garden and honestly ask which season feels thin on color, then shop specifically to fill that gap, even if it means choosing something that isn't blooming on the shelf that day. My tip: keep a simple running list on your phone of plants I still need for spring, for late summer, for fall, and so on, so that every nursery trip fills a genuine gap in your year-long display, rather than adding yet another June-blooming plant to an already June-heavy collection. Shop for the whole calendar, not just today's blooms. Your garden will thank you every month of the year. Now let's talk about a mistake that can bring real trouble home with it, with number 6. Number 6 can genuinely bring trouble home with you, spreading well beyond the single plant you bought, not inspecting closely for pests and disease before purchasing. A nursery, by its very nature, holds a huge number of plants in close proximity, which unfortunately makes it possible for pest or disease problems to occasionally slip through, even at well-run establishments. Bringing home an infested or diseased plant doesn't just risk that one plant. It can introduce a problem that spreads to your existing, previously healthy garden, turning one bad purchase into a much bigger headache. The good news is that a thorough visual check takes less than a minute and catches the vast majority of problems before they ever leave the store with you. My habit: before buying, turn a few leaves over and check the undersides, where many pests like to hide. Look for sticky residue, which often signals aphids or scale insects, visible webbing, which can indicate spider mites or unusual spots, discoloration, or a powdery coating on the leaves, which often points to fungal disease. A healthy plant should have consistent leaf color throughout and firm, unblemished foliage. My tip: if you do spot a minor issue on a plant you otherwise love, it isn't automatically a deal breaker. A few aphids, for instance, are often easily treated at home. But if you see it, ask a staff member directly, since they can tell you whether it's a minor, easily managed issue or a sign of a bigger problem you'd be wise to avoid entirely. A 30-second inspection protects your whole garden, not just one plant. Now let's revisit a design principle from a completely different angle, with number 7. Number 7 brings us back to a design principle we've discussed before, but here we're looking at it specifically as a shopping habit, buying one of nearly everything that catches your eye, rather than several of a select few. We talked in an earlier video about how grouping and repeating plants makes a garden look far more designed and expensive than scattering single specimens of many different varieties. But this mistake actually begins right at the nursery, in the cart. It's so tempting to grab one of this gorgeous perennial, one of that lovely shrub, one of this pretty grass, filling your cart with variety. The trouble is, that shopping pattern makes the grouped, cohesive look nearly impossible to achieve at home, since you simply don't have enough of any single plant to create that intentional drift or mass. Here's the reframe that helps. Before you shop, decide on a small handful of plants you genuinely love for your space, say 3 to 5 varieties, and commit to buying several of each rather than one of many. Your total spending often ends up remarkably similar, but your finished garden looks dramatically more polished and professional. My habit: make a short shopping list before you go, limited to just a few plant types, and stick to it reasonably closely, resisting the pull of every other beautiful thing calling to you from the aisles. My tip: if you truly can't resist a one-of-a-kind treasure, that's completely fine. Just remember our earlier tip about setting aside a small collector's corner for those single specimens, and keep your main visible beds reserved for the repeated grouped plants that create that cohesive designed look. Buy fewer varieties, more of each. Your garden will look intentional instead of scattered. Now let's talk about a mistake hiding beneath the surface, with number 8. Number 8 is easy to overlook because, unlike sun and shade, it isn't something you can see just by glancing at a spot in your yard, ignoring a plant's soil and drainage requirements. Just as important as sunlight, a plant's soil preference genuinely determines whether it thrives or struggles. Some plants, like our lavender and rock garden favorites from earlier videos, demand sharp, fast drainage and will quickly rot in heavy, wet clay. Others, like our cardinal flower and turtlehead, actively want consistently moist soil and will wilt and struggle in anything too dry. Buying a plant without considering whether your actual soil matches its needs is a bit like buying the right plant for the wrong climate all over again, just underground instead of in the air. The good news is that you likely already have a rough sense of your own soil from working in your yard. Does water tend to pool and stay after rain, suggesting heavier, slower draining soil? Or does it drain away quickly, suggesting a sandier, faster draining type? That basic knowledge, brought with you to the nursery, helps you choose plants that are already suited to what you're working with. My habit, before buying a plant whose care requirements mention specific soil needs, honestly compare them to what you already know about your own yard's drainage, rather than assuming every plant will simply adapt. My tip, if you fall in love with a plant that needs different drainage than your natural soil provides, you're not necessarily out of luck. Amending a planting hole with sand or gravel for better drainage, or building a raised bed, can genuinely bridge that gap for a smaller planting. Match the plant to your actual soil, not just your climate. It's the underground half of the equation. Now let's talk about a mistake with real environmental consequences, with number 9. Number 9 is a mistake that can have consequences reaching well beyond your own front yard: not checking whether a plant is considered invasive in your region before buying it. Here's the tricky part. Some plants sold at nurseries, even now, can spread aggressively beyond a garden's borders in certain climates, escaping into natural areas and crowding out the native plants that local wildlife depends on, exactly the kind of native plants we celebrated in an earlier video. A plant can be perfectly well-behaved in one region and genuinely invasive in another, which is part of why this mistake is so easy to make without realizing it. The plant looks lovely and innocent sitting there on the shelf. This isn't about avoiding every plant that didn't originate locally. It's specifically about the smaller number of species known to cause real ecological problems in your particular area. My habit, before buying an unfamiliar plant, especially a fast-spreading vine, grass, or ground cover, do a quick search of the plant's name along with the word invasive and your state or region right there on your phone in the nursery aisle. It takes under a minute and can prevent introducing a genuine problem to the local ecosystem. My tip, if you discover a plant you love is invasive in your area, ask a staff member for a well-behaved native or non-invasive alternative that offers a similar look. Nearly every invasive plant has a lovely, responsible substitute, often one we've covered in our native plants video. A quick check protects more than just your own yard. It protects the wild spaces around it too. Now, for our 10th and final mistake, one that even experienced gardeners fall into. Here it is. And here it is, number 10, the mistake I promised you at the start, the one that even experienced gardeners, myself included, fall into more often than we'd like to admit: buying the biggest, most expensive specimen available, when a smaller, far cheaper plant would serve just as well. I understand the appeal completely. A large specimen gives you that instant, established, finished look the very day you plant it, and the patience required to wait for a small plant to grow feels like a real sacrifice. But here's what experienced gardeners eventually learn, often the hard way. For many perennials, shrubs, and even some trees, a smaller, significantly less expensive plant will often catch up to a larger specimen within just a couple of growing seasons, since younger plants frequently establish their root systems faster and adapt more readily to their new home than a large, mature specimen does. You end up paying a real premium for immediate size that nature would have given you anyway, for a fraction of the cost with just a little patience. This doesn't mean size is never worth paying for. Sometimes a genuine focal point tree or an anchor shrub is worth the investment for the instant impact. But it's worth asking yourself honestly every time whether you're paying for genuine necessity or simply for impatience. my habit, before reaching for the largest, priciest option. Price compare against a smaller size of the very same plant, and honestly weigh whether the extra cost is truly worth it for your particular spot, or whether your patience could save you real money. My tip: this is especially true for perennials and many shrubs. Reserve your splurging for that one genuine focal point specimen we've discussed in earlier videos, and buy smaller, more affordable sizes for the supporting plants filling in around it. Your garden will look just as full within a couple of seasons, at a fraction of the cost. Patience over impulse, smaller and cheaper, often wins. It's the lesson every seasoned gardener eventually learns. Now let's bring it all together. And there you have it, 10 mistakes to avoid the next time you're standing in a nursery aisle, from reading that little plant tag all the way to resisting the pull of the biggest, most expensive specimen on the shelf. None of these require any special expertise, just a few simple habits, most of them taking only seconds, that dramatically improve the odds that every plant you bring home actually thrives. Here's the thought I'd love to leave you with. The best gardening decisions often happen before you ever pick up a trowel, right there in the nursery aisle, in the choices about which plants come home with you in the first place. A little intention at checkout saves so much heartache in the months that follow. So tell me down in the comments, what was that impulse buy story I asked about at the very start? And which of these 10 mistakes do you recognize in your own shopping habits? Share it with your growing zone, and let's shop a little smarter together from now on. And do go say a warm hello to a fellow recovering impulse buyer down there in the comments. We've all been there, and this little community is a wonderfully forgiving place to admit it. I've got more wonderful ideas coming your way soon, so make sure you're subscribed with that bell turned on so you never miss a video. Until next time, this is Eleanor. Keep your hands in the soil and your heart in the garden. Take care now. Bye-bye.